Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. It's a great pleasure to be once again joined by Danny Seaman. Danny, thank you so much for joining again the briefing.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Danny, I always love having you here. And last week, I think right after our conversation, you said, "Oh no, I forgot to wish all the viewers a happy Passover." So I said, "Okay, there you go. It's an excuse to have you back." So we'll make sure we're not going to end the call today before you give us your Passover wishes. Before we do that, let's of course discuss all of the necessary updates in this war and very much maybe focus on what's happening here on the home front in Israel. So why don't you take it away? What can you share with us?
Well, with all the political things that are happening here in the international politics, with the Netanyahu visit to the United States, suddenly called in after he was in Hungary, um, we tend to forget that we're in the middle of this battle going on, and there are seven fronts, as we've spoken very often. But the two major fronts right now are obviously in Gaza. And in the Gaza Strip, the IDF is increasing and its effort down there, and especially in the Rafah area. A few days ago, we had missiles fired from a region in the center of the Gaza Strip. So they still have those abilities. They're using the last of what they have available at the moment. And Israel is going to operate in these particular areas. Today, in the effort in Rafah, for example, exposed that there were several tunnels that were uncovered. One of them was blown up last night. Many of you may have seen because they're very quick to share the horrible explosions going on. Don't build these freaking tunnels, and there won't be these kind of explosions. Release our hostages, we won't be there. So we've discovered several tunnels going in from Egypt. Once again, Egypt is involved, and they can't tell us they don't know that this is happening because these tunnels require a huge effort. And the attempt is to bring in new missiles and new capabilities for Hamas. So our presence there, and unlike in the past year and a half or up until January, the IDF is not moving in, going in, operating, and moving out. We are now moving in and remaining in these locations, taking out the threat to Israel. And as the Prime Minister said, as long as they continue to refuse to release hostages, we will be taking control over territories there. So this is what is happening on the military side. There's also international politics involved, but I'll address that in a moment. Israel, in addition to the operations going on for a while now in Judea and Samaria, today began an operation in the Shechem area, popularly known as Nablus. Nablus because the Arabs cannot pronounce Neapolis. Neapolis was new city, was the name the Romans gave to Shechem, the biblical city of Shechem. So Israel's operating against the Hamas infrastructure and any terrorist infrastructure there. And once again, to remind the viewers here, Shechem is under the control of the Palestinian Authority, the same PLO that supposedly signed an agreement with us and claimed to want to take over responsibility in Gaza, and the Egyptians are pushing for that to happen. They can't control what is happening in the areas that they have full control over at the moment, and they're allowing the terrorist infrastructure to develop and expand there, requiring from us to intervene and remove these threats to Israeli civilians. We're not going to let what happened in October 7th, 2023 occur again. And therefore, we're operating there and taking out these threats to Israel. So those are the two main factors. The United States is operating and doing a very good job in Yemen with the Houthis at the moment. The fact of the matter is that in over a week, there have been no missiles, even one missile a day that they were firing before, knowing they can't cause us much damage. They're not even succeeding in doing that at the moment. And this is a large extent due to the actions of the United States, the American Air Force. If we look at the other, or the essence of all of this, and this goes to the next topic, which is the diplomatic front, the United States has been moving ammunitions. I know you've spoken about this here on the webinars in the past week or so, but they continue to move in sophisticated weapons and troops, aircraft, etc., into Israel, into American bases in the Middle East, all in preparation, if necessary. And this leads to the important meeting that occurred this week, which was sort of surprised when Netanyahu, who was in a very important meeting for us, meaning in the presenting the international stature of the state of Israel and the leadership of Israel in Hungary, on the same day that Israel visited, the Prime Minister of Israel was the guest of the President of Hungary. The Czech Republic announced that it's moving its embassy and recognizing the Jewish right to Jerusalem, which is very important. Hungary announced that it is withdrawing from the International Criminal Court. So all these things are positioning it to sending a very clear message that these actions against the state of Israel are not recognized by elements in the international community to only encourage others to fall into line. And I mention that because today, the United Nations Secretary General Guterres found it necessary to warn about Israel's actions in Gaza, and he will not accept what Israel, and the fact that Israel wants to take control over international aid coming there. He said that the United Nations will refuse that. All the time, all this criticism, and not one word by this despicable creature about our hostages that are still being held in violation of that same international law that they're so quick to waive when it comes to Israel, and not say a word about this and about the hostages still being held in horrible conditions there. And then you had the heads of 6 UN organizations warning about how horrible the situation there is. Put pressure on Hamas and its representatives in Egypt and in Qatar, put pressure on them to release every one of the Israeli hostages. There won't be a crisis in Gaza. The crisis is one that the Hamas brought upon the people who elected them into office. The Gazans elected and still support Hamas, despite all the demonstrations going on. They still support Hamas there because not a single one of them found it necessary up until now to reveal or even call for the release of the hostages, the Jewish Israeli hostages being held in the Gaza Strip at the moment. So with all due respect to these international organizations that are always opinionated when it comes to Israel, selectively apply to the Jewish state international law. So they'll excuse us if we start getting too worked up about it and too excited about it. And to round this up, the Prime Minister of Israel returned today from the United States. He was called in. People weren't clear what it was about. It was very clear that it was about what the United States plans to do with Iran, the fact that they are having these high-level meetings at the moment, or will have this weekend with the Iranians, meetings that the Iranians are already trying to belittle. But what happened here was that Trump felt it necessary to inform Netanyahu of what the United States is doing as partners, but also beyond that. The President of the United States addresses things as the leader, not only of the Western world, the biggest power in the world. And Trump knows that when you're doing this, the way he perceives things, the way the United States or any leader of the United States sees things is very different than what a very powerful, albeit small country in the Middle East sees it. And therefore, being the partner and understanding that we're in the midst of a war of survival here for the Jewish people in the state of Israel, and for the respect he has. Of course, he has respect as a world leader for Netanyahu, but he also understands that he has a responsibility for the survival, President Trump, for the survival of the state of Israel, and respected us enough and respected that enough to hear what Netanyahu had to say about this. And I do believe two things. First off, the Prime Minister heard. He made clear afterwards in a statement that he said that we will not wait forever. He's allowing the United States, and hopefully the United States will be able to resolve this in a way that is acceptable to the Western world, and it's the same for Israel. Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. And so he heard what the Israel position is, how we believe that we should continue with this. And I think he respects Israel's position, knowing very clear that we cannot let this drag on forever, and therefore they'll put a time limit on it. And afterwards, I think he accepts Israel's position as to what needs to be done. If you want to look at this in another way, I think the president of the United States sees it as an American, as a Westerner. I think he's very logical in saying that it would be in the best interest of Iran to do what the Americans are asking, but he misunderstands them and doesn't understand they can't afford to do this. And I believe there's also, we'll talk now, we're on the eve of Passover, just like it would have been in the best interest of Pharaoh to release the Jews that were the Israelites in Egypt at the time, but God hardened his heart. I believe that you'll be witnessing something similar in the next few weeks as the Iranians very foolishly, or who knows, maybe there's divine intervention, will be hardening their heart and will not cooperate. And therefore, there will be a price to pay eventually. And to be honest, in the interest of the state of Israel, to take this out, and I think also for the Iranians, just as we saw happen with Hezbollah in Lebanon and with the Syrian regime, once these elements who are abusive, abuse their own people, they're thugs, the moment they're weakened and their people see that they're weakened, you'll have the same thing happening in Iran as we had in Syria, where the public will also rise up against this weakened terrorist regime, which is the Ayatollahs in Iran.
Danny, throughout this war, we have seen countries standing with Israel despite international pressure, like Hungary, as you mentioned, who is now in talks to move their embassy to Jerusalem, which is very significant, right? When the US did that, everyone was saying that it will disrupt the Arab world. And of course, that never happened. And then we have countries who are not standing with Israel, and Egypt is a good example that we're seeing in the news right now, that there are still tunnels that are active and there's still smuggling happening into Gaza. And when we look at the U.S., obviously the U.S. has been supportive of Israel, but there's been tension. And we know that prior to the ground invasion in Gaza back in October 23, the U.S. Was trying to slow things down. We know prior to the attack on Nasrallah, the U.S. was trying to slow things down. And I'm curious your thoughts at this moment when Iran is really in the sights, the Iranian nuclear program. Is this a moment where the U.S. is slowing down Israel? Or is this a moment where there's really a meeting of the minds and they're going to go ahead? Or maybe this is a moment where Israel's going to have to turn to the U.S. and say, look, you told us not to escalate with Nasrallah, but we did. You told us not to go to Gaza, and we did. And you're telling us to slow down with Iran, and we're not going to. What do you think? Where does the U.S. Relationship stand at this point?
Well, there's no doubt that we always have a special relationship with the United States. There have been difficulties at times, but at the end of the day, whoever the leader of the United States is, they will do what is in the best interest, as they should, what is in the best interest of the United States. Now, more often than not, Israel's position vis-a-vis the United States, we're usually on the American side. It just makes simple sense to be on the side of what is right and what is just, and that is the United States. Anybody who questions that, who would they rather have being the world leader? Take any country throughout history and compare it to the United States today with all its faults. And I don't know about people watching us right now. I'd much rather have the United States in control and being the world leader than any other country at the moment or at any time in history. So our values do coincide very often, more often than not. But eventually, at the end of the day, Americans, the United States has its own interests. And we can try to abide by those as much as possible. With the previous administration, their interests very often collided with that of Israel. They believed or they wanted to tie our hands behind our backs. But this has been something that's been going on, well, if you take the United States vis-a-vis Israel, forever, since the establishment of the State of Israel. The United States did come to our aid in 1973, for example, understanding that they could not allow Israel to lose the war back in Yom Kippur. And the same thing happened here on October 7th. But this administration understands that to address the threat that Israel faces at the moment, You can't appease terrorism anymore. You can't appease the violent, undemocratic elements that are in the Arab world. For too often, this has been the acceptable attitude that, oh, we can't expect the Arabs, we can't expect the PLO, we can't expect the Jordanians, we can't expect the Syrians, we can't expect them to uphold values and principles that are important to us. This shouldn't be acceptable in any way. Nobody in the Western world, and by the way, one of the efforts of the Marxists is to let the people in the Western world believe that our values are in some way tainted. But if you compare this to Islam, if you compare it to the non-democratic, dictatorial regimes throughout the world, we have to demand that they uphold these same principles that we hold our very valued ourselves in the Western world. And at least this administration sees that. And they believe, and more power to them, that they want the United States to be the leader in the world. And I'm not opposed to this. So yes, there are times that they have their own interests. Right now, we're in a very unusual situation compared to the past. For us, it is quite obvious for the state of Israel that we are in an existential moment. Whether we survive or not, and for the peace for our future, is dependent on whether or not we totally take out the enemy right now. First and foremost, in Gaza, Hamas cannot be allowed to return there. No element that supports elements, Islamic elements, extreme Islamic elements, can be allowed to take over. The same thing goes for Judea and Samaria. The Oslo Accords are over. They've gone bankrupt and are no longer can be applied to anything in the Middle East. There is no two-state solution anymore. And these are the things that Israel will move forward with. The majority of the Israeli public agree with this, some more vocally, others understanding after what we witnessed on October 7th. And therefore, despite the friendship with the United States, we understand that behind the entire effort to annihilate the state of Israel are the Iranians. And they therefore, and they're not hiding it. They're very clear that they want to destroy and annihilate the state of Israel. And they've said if they had nuclear weapons, they would use them against the state of Israel. And this is something we can no longer accept. We can't in any way belittle these kind of statements because we saw the consequences of this on October 7th. And when we say never again, we failed with that on October 7th. Now we're completely serious. So if there reaches a point where we believe that the United States, and I don't think we'll reach that, we will do what we find is necessary for the survival of the state of Israel and the Jewish people in the land of Israel, even if it contradicts and collides with the interests of the United States.
Thank you, Danny. Now, the other critical piece of information we need to discuss, this development with the Supreme Court in Israel blocking the Prime Minister's ability to fire the head of the Shin Bet, Israel's security service. And how is that going to influence keeping all of us safe, right? The Shin Bet is a critical national security agency, making sure that Israelis are able to sleep safe at night. And all of this politicking is now seemingly interfering with that. What do we make of all of this?
It's a problem. It's a part of a broader picture of what is happening here, that we've had political strife now for several years. The fact that certain elements claim to be fighting for the democracy, but are the first on the forefront of denying the basic elements of a democracy in Israel, which is first and foremost the choice of the people, the government that is duly elected, a balanced and judicial system which is not applies laws selectively. October 7th, to a large degree, was a consequence of the internal strife in Israel. At least this is what the Hamas themselves say. And they admitted that they saw this as a weakness in Israel, and they took advantage of it. Certain elements in the Israeli military and security did fail to a certain degree because of their involvement in the political strife. The Supreme Court in Israel has taken over responsibilities that are not part, and in no country in the Western world does the court have those kind of power. But what they're doing right now is and they say about Trump inviting Netanyahu over, at least he had the respect of the elected official and elected government of the state of Israel to hear him out and respect the Israeli people, understanding that Netanyahu is in the midst of fighting a war of survival, and to respect that and understand that and hear what he has to say over the American decision on something that does have an impact on Israel. But our courts didn't do that. And they got involved in a political issue here in Israel that they have no authority over, and made a decision yesterday that took away the right of the government and its appointments of. Can you imagine that the court in the United States would tell the government, the duly elected president, that he cannot appoint the head of the FBI or the CIA or the Prime Minister of England, the head of the MI5? This is what they decided here in Israel yesterday. And they know that there's two elements here, that the Prime Minister right now, his focus is on this war. And the Prime Minister knows that if we get involved in a political debate here, and some on the left wing have been very clear, and I'm not talking about the fringes, I'm talking about the former head of the Supreme Court in Israel, Barak, and also a former Prime Minister of Israel, who we know is getting funded by elements in the United States who want to cause strife in the state of Israel. And they're talking about a civil war. They're talking about blood in the streets. Aaron Barak, in an interview to the Italian newspaper yesterday, said he expects to see blood in the streets. You miserable piece of crap. When our best of our people here, our young men and women, are falling and being murdered and dying in the streets in Gaza to defend us and to defend you, you miserable old age. I'm sorry, I can't say the word, but you know what I'm thinking. For him to speak so openly. So the Prime Minister is showing the responsibility, because the government could very easily say they're not accepting the decision of the Supreme Court, knowing that this would lead to violence in the streets of Israel. But the Prime Minister, who's often been accused that the only thing he cares about is his own political survival, knows that his political base are not happy with that decision. By the way, it's something I will be talking about tomorrow on my radio show in Israel. And there's debate within the right wing between those who think that we should go against them, and if they want to go to civil war, we will defeat them there as well. But the Prime Minister doesn't even want that to be a possibility. And he is losing the support of his base because they're not happy about what the Supreme Court is doing. Because his focus, and that's what I support him over, his focus in what needs to be done right now, even if it costs him in a year and a half his premiership, he will not allow us to deteriorate into a civil war or civilian strife here inside Israel. His focus is on the ball, and the ball right now is Hamas and Iran. And that's what we all have to be focused on. Only there's political element of irresponsible, the same way as you have in the United States. And those of you listening here or watching here who do not appreciate that, I don't give a damn what you appreciate or not. The left wing are responsible for the weakness in the Western civilization right now because of their inability to accept the fact that the public have spoken and have voted against them. We have been suffering this in Israel now for the better part of 3 years. And you're suffering that right now in the United States because of these irresponsible left-wingers who have moved to the Marxist opinion of how to weaken the Western civilization. So that's what's happening here right now. You can see how aggravated I am about this, but I support the Prime Minister. If he will not have this be degraded into a civil war in the streets of Israel, I agree with him. What is more important right now is the unity, and if that means we have to give in to what the Supreme Court and the politicians on the left wing are doing, we'll do that because we have a greater threat to us at the moment, and that is the threat of those who are seeking, and when they had the opportunity, butchered, murdered, raped, burned our children. And if you haven't seen the footage, I suggest, and this is what I said on my radio show, every morning, every politician, every journalist, anybody involved in politics here has to stop, take 5.5 minutes, look at that video that summarizes the activity of what Hamas, the atrocities of the Hamas on October 7th, and then open your freaking mouth and forget what the essence of what we're doing here at the moment and what our responsibility is.
Danny, thank you for telling us what you really think. It's always a great pleasure to hear your passion and your no-nonsense understanding of what's happening in Israel. You have exactly 2 minutes left to share with us your Passover wishes.
Well, first off, Chag Sameach to all those who observe, and I think we also have Easter coming up. So the Christians who are with us, wishing them also a happy Easter when that occurs exactly. I don't know, but I know it's soon around the Passover. I have to remember that we're all in this together. We may have our differences, but at the end of the day, the Hamas, when they came in, and any terrorist who comes into Israel, they never asked us what our political opinions are. They never cared if we are right wing, left wing, if we look the occupation in the eye, or if we're reform. We're all, as we say in Hebrew, b'nei mavet. As far as they're concerned, they'll kill all of us. So let's put our differences aside. Remember why we're here for. At the end of the day, we can only rely upon each other for the benefit of all of us, and more importantly, for our children. So wish us all a very happy and family-oriented Passover. I always say that when you look at the table, where did we all, here in Israel at least, we all celebrated 100 years ago in different places around the world. Now we're here and very fortunate to have the state of Israel that for 2,000 years, our ancestors could only dream about this possibility. So we have an added responsibility to our lives here for all of them and for our future, not to mess this up. And remember why we've been given this opportunity. And one last thing, I have my podcast on JNS. Tonight will be coming up. I interview an Israeli about the Shin Bet and why the problem. It'll be up on JNS TV. You're welcome to watch that as well. It's in English, and get some insights on what is happening here in Israel. So thank all of you for joining us and watching this. And thank you for Moshe for giving us the opportunity, and to the Bitonistim for all they're doing.
Danny, Seaman, thank you so much. And thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.